Hi, my name is Charlie. I'm the president of the Illinois Association of Home Inspectors. On this interview is Jamie Dunsing of Dunsing Consultants, Ross Niag of Chicago Building Inspections, and our lobbyist, Bridget Dougherty, who's been working with us. First, I want to introduce Bridget. She's been a lobbyist for over 20 years. I don't know exactly how many years. But she's been working with us now, I want to say 9 months, 10 months, almost a full year, Bridget?
Since July of last year.
Since July of last year. Would you mind just taking a few minutes and telling everybody about yourself and what you do and give us a little synopsis, please?
Right. I'm a licensed attorney since 1992 and primarily, almost exclusively working in the Illinois legislature. Since that time, I, a year out of law school, went to work for Mayor Daley in the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs and was number 2 there on a team of about 8. Intergovernmental Affairs handles lobbying at the city council level, Washington and Springfield. So that's when I learned my craft, 8 years in Springfield representing the city of Chicago, learning just about every subject matter under the sun. And I had some great teachers and really learned the process. After that, I struck out on my own and had my own practice for about another 8 years, representing everything from an international pharmaceutical company to small women-owned construction businesses. Tried to keep it very diverse, keep a lot of subject matters going at the same time. So I've seen a lot of change in the General Assembly. I then left for a few years and did a few other things and came back in about 2013 and have been building back a practice since then. It's been very successful. So I was retained by you guys in, gratefully, July of last year to address your issues with regard to the rewrite of the Home Inspectors Enabling Statute, which is up for renewal this year.
Great. And before we get into the changes, can you just give a short primer on what's the difference between the Act and what's the difference between the rule and how those are changed?
Right. So the Act is actually in statute, and it is a freestanding act. It's the Illinois Home Inspectors Act, and the statute controls the regulations. So the Act is rewritten every 10 years. And again, we're coming up on a rewrite. They sunset, and this is not exclusive to the home inspection industry. They all sunset with an opportunity to take a look at what's happened with regard to changes in the industry, and that's an opportunity to rewrite the statute. So that's where we're at. The regulations are a separate and subsequent process that are really the meat and potatoes of implementing the law. And the regulations are not supposed to go any further than the enacting legislation. And that's part of a process that goes through the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules in Springfield. And we'll be following that process as well. Again, it is after the statute is enacted or changed. It is in some respects an ongoing process as they address things that come up in the day-to-day practice of your profession. But we'll be addressing some of these changes in rules as well as in legislation. But for now, we're really focused on the current General Assembly, which runs from January to May of this year to change the statute.
So Ross, Jamie, myself, we've been working with the IDFPR, and we've come to an agreement with the Act, but I just want to reiterate there's a lot of work left to do to finish up, and because we still have to make changes and everything else to the rule, so it's not ending right now. That's all there is to it. So the Illinois Association of Home Inspectors and the Illinois Department of Financial Professional Regulation does have an agreement. I mean, but I also want to be clear that when an act gets changed, okay, Yeah, if everybody can mute themselves when they're not talking, because we are getting a lot of feedback. But in order for what our agreement to become a law, it still has to be voted on by the House of Representatives, by the Senator, and signed by the governor. So anything could change between now and the time that final signature gets on there. But I would like to go for it, and I'm going to put it back on Bridget again here a little bit. If you could go down the list of the items that we've agreed on, basically, with the IDFPR.
Right. So we started negotiating right off the bat in the month of August with IDFPR. And based on discussions with Charlie and Ross and Jamie, together draft legislation, which at that point was pretty rough. But the idea at that time, in order to improve the quality of the profession, to protect the public, to an apprentice level of licensure, so have a dual two-tiered licensure structure in the statute. That's very common in professions, especially the state world that you guys operate in. The appraiser, but you guys do not have it. So that was our intention. You would go in, requirements to become and be the same as they are now, but we would have a higher, more stringent level requirements to become a full-blown home, including primarily a field exam required now, and I'll let Charlie talk a little bit more about that. So our negotiations, 3 or 4 Zooms, lengthy Zooms with the chief of real estate of the IDFPR and about 6 or 8 of his staffers, and traded back and forth bill drafts and ideas, sort of tried to nail down some pieces of this. In the meantime, because they're coming up for a rewrite, they had things they wanted to accomplish. So our primary objective, which was this other level of light, make it more stringent to the home inspector. They had some things they wanted to address. So they were, let's say, early to mid-fall. We made a tentative agreement with regard to a couple of the items that they wanted, including mandatory liability insurance. I reached out to some legislators, and we've got shell bills pending in both chambers. And at the same time, the department filed their expected that they would do. And we went back and forth a bit, ultimately decided to a couple of things. And Charlie, if I'm getting ahead of myself, slow me down. But they did agree exam requirement to become a home inspector into the statute. They didn't agree to a 2-tiered structure, the field exam, which was one of the main objectives the association wanted. We're going to see how that plays out with regard to implementation through the rules processes. But that field exam really changes, and hopefully, the profession, depending on how it's run and who runs it, things like that. That was a major success, and we're very pleased about that. They did things to strengthen the profession, which will be implemented in rules. There's 2 items: a higher passing score for the initial written exam, additional continuing education requirements for a first-time renewal. So, quick summary, I mean, moving parts to it, and there were a series of long discussions, as I said, but we have arrived at this spot with a major statutory change, putting in the field exam, as Charlie said.
Charlie,
Sorry
we can't
about
hear
that, guys. That's one of the problems with hitting the mute button. So everybody, in order to get a license right now, they all have to take a test. I'm sorry, they all have to take a class. You have to pass the final proctored exam from the school, and then every candidate has to do 5 field events. Once you do that, that gives a new candidate their ticket or transcript, and that allows them to take the state exam. If they pass the state exam and pay their fees, they get their license. So the only thing that we're really adding to that right now is a field exam. And we wrote out a policy. We've had, I want to say we had like 7 or 8 of our members get involved in on there. And I'm definitely going to list their names up in the text just as a thank you. But they put a ton of work on getting the whole layout for the field exam. And the IDFPR liked it. So they're adding it into the license. So now they have to take a class, proctored exam, 5 field events, pass the state written exam. And as Bridget said, they're going to raise the percentage up modest. You know, we don't know what that's going to be yet, but it won't be significant. And then they're going to have to pass some sort of a field exam that we're going to work on ironing all that out as well. The real estate agents have pre and post education, and they're kind of adding that into our new licensees as well. What about some of the other stuff, Bridget, like the insurance issues?
Right. So that was a concession that we made, and honestly, I'm glad we made it. It's very common in other professions, but up till now, or until this bill passes, home inspectors carry liability insurance. So we came to an agreement that with the effective date of this law, whatever it ends up being, it could be next summer, it could be January 1st of 2022, you will have to carry liability insurance amount of no less than $100,000. They also wanted IDFPR to mandate the amount of a deductible you must carry, which we pushed back on pretty hard. It was overreach by the department. You know, that's a business decision. I don't do with it. I can see where they want you to have insurance, but the details of that insurance I don't think should be of any concern to them. So they've dropped that piece, and there's no deductible amount, but there is a mandate that you carry liability insurance an amount of $1.
Nice. And Ross, do you remember when they were talking about errors and omissions insurance as well?
I think it was vaguely discussed, and then it was dropped abruptly. The E&O, I think, is more of a personal choice in terms of risk. And the first step might be general liability for Illinois, and 2 years down the road, they may want to enforce E&O. Who knows?
If I can interject, Charlie, one of the things we did was we did our homework and compared what we currently have against what other states have. And we found that most of the states require some form of insurance. Not all necessarily E&O, but they were overwhelming in requiring general liability. So satisfied.
Amen. So what other changes are in that law that the IDFPR wanted?
So what happened was they filed a bill. It is House Bill 562, sponsored by Representative Marcus Evans, who was the House Chairman Commerce Committee, which this bill is likely to go through. The bill, if you looked it up on the Illinois General Assembly's website, is their rewrite. We had some concerns. They were dealing, just as we were, with deadline around filing bills in the General Assembly, so they had to get in what they. But we went back to the drawing table after that and sat down and walked through their bill, really page by page, line by line. Made a couple of changes, including changes to existing laws that the association Standards of practice section of the act, we removed a reference to codes. We thought that that was confusing because, as you all know better than I, municipal code, building code dramatically from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Some additional changes with regard to inspection reports and how they can be shared and who has to be listed on them, negotiation back and forth about that. We also believe that through the regulatory process, they're going to allow to, when chooses, put their license on inact for a period of time, and that's very common in other professions as well, which case they wouldn't have to carry insurance during that period because they're they also wanted to provision in their bill that would prohibit gifts and the issuance of insurance that you guys frequently provide additional insured status, and we have continued negotiating on that. They took out the prohibition on offering insurance. We told them it was common industry practice and we'd like to continue it, and they agreed. And we're still having a discussion about the prohibition on gifts.
All in all, there really weren't that many changes that were made into this stuff, right?
Well, the interesting thing is that, the addition of the field exam is a major change, but it's actually just a couple word changes in the statute. But that is a major change, and that's all going to get worked out in the regular, how that thing is structured, who administers it, what the requirements are. The process is for. You don't want to put a ton of detail in statute because, first of all, it's harder to change. And technology changes and practice changes, so that is, although it's just a couple words in the statute, that's a huge change, and that was really one of the biggest of association.
Jamie, you got anything to add on the changes, the things you liked?
Probably what I liked is that for existing inspectors, there isn't going to be a whole lot of change. It's business as usual with the addition of this insurance. The changes are more for public protection for people coming into the business. And that was kind of one of our goals from the start, is to make sure that we as inspectors are not, given undue difficulty in maintaining our license, and that people that are coming into the business aren't leaving the business tarnished. So that's my biggest takeaway on this, is it's kind of business as usual for most of us.
And Ross, you got anything to add?
No, I echo Jamie's comments. He wanted to make it fair and just a shade more stringent to really have, the industry represented by professionals and not fly by night. So, with a pretty high attrition rate, I think we're going to do that. People that are committed to doing this have to take the next steps, call themselves professional home inspectors.
Isn't that the truth? So I'm guessing within 1 to 2 weeks, and Bridget, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to see the amendment to House Bill 562, which is all the changes that we've all agreed on, and we'll be able to see all that in writing then.
That's right. We are in deadline week for filing bills, so he's not going to file an amendment right now. Everyone's busy reading the bills that have been filed in the House and Senate. But he did do so this is the legislative liaison for the department. They did provide a draft of what their amendment's going to look like, and it does address a number of things that we've just discussed. Looks like it's in pretty good shape. Just let me back up a minute. When you go into a negotiation like this, and we did it with plenty of runway time, if you say, because we started last summer, sunset is January of 2022. Ideally, you want what's called legislators, their sponsor, our sponsor, anybody does not want to get in the middle of a fight. Ideally, you come to them and deal. And then there's one bill, everything ends up on one, it's called one agreed bill. In this case, it looks like it's going to be 6-2. And that really makes the process a lot easier. And thank goodness it way. But as Charlie said, it's not over till. In the meantime, we did a shell in the House. Representative Kelly filed that shell for us, and we had a Zoom with her talking about what we were setting out to do and where we were in the process of negotiations. I just spoke with her. That shell will sit out there and it will remain there, and it'll be sort of like if things go south. Trying to do the same thing in the Senate, a little bit more difficulty, but we're not at the deadline yet. So there. So us now, today is the Senate filing deadline. We got to get through that. The General Assembly is meeting remotely, as you can imagine, throughout the month of March. Committees are going to meet remotely, at least for the first 2 weeks of March. And this is a new experience for everybody at this. Normally I'm in Springfield every single week. I would talk to every single member of a committee that my bills are going through. So it's just a new experience for we are centimeters away from an agreement. I'm going to talk with the legislative liaison for IDFPR, remaining items, probably Monday. We will see an amendment to House Bill 562. It will presumably go to committee, which has not yet been assigned, at which time, if we are in 100% agreement, chairman, the Republican spokesperson, and the staffers that the association is signed on, which is what they want. They want an agreed bill. If 2 is the vehicle, it has to go through certain stages in both the House and Senate. So it'll have a committee hearing in the House. It'll go to second reading and then third reading and be voted on in the House. And it'll go over to the Senate. The department had intended Senate bill as well. It looks like they don't. So another day or two to address that. The idea there was they're called companion bills. You have 2 identical bills moving at the same time. But assuming 562 is the vehicle, it'll go over to the Senate. Same thing will happen there. Time to make changes, even with this first amendment that we expect to see in the next week or so. We can address, if we can still address it in the Senate. But all in all, it's been moving fairly well, sensed a little in the department. But they are now very cooperative and really paying attention when we're pointing out very practical concerns, implementation, because as I keep reminding them, we're the industry and you're the government. Klein is the one that does this work every day, and we put in these new items, things to be addressed. So that's where we are in terms of process. From January to the end of May, hopefully first. And then if the bill passes both chambers and there's no amendment in the Senate has to go back to the House for what's called concurrent, and it goes to the governor, and we could have a law, probably the latest would be August or September of 2021.
Which is fantastic. And I also want to add, I don't think that we would have even, I mean, they might have listened to us. We could have voiced our opinion. We could have talked to a few different staffs. And I think home inspectors all over the state would have been just making their phone calls and doing stuff. But having this unified front, and especially having somebody like Bridget and Ross and Jamie jump in and interrupt me anytime, I really don't think we never would have ever had the discussions. We wouldn't have had the support, the sponsor, the legislative power, if that's the right term, to get them to negotiate and listen to us and hear our desires. And I'm actually, you know, I plead guilty for ignoring everything for 20 years. But I'm thrilled the fact that we actually are doing something now, and having a lobbyist here full time and keeping our ear to the state legislator. I think that's a huge thing, and I hope that we just don't let this die with the one and done. We need to take care of our profession. We need to have a voice in there. And I'm glad that we have over 500 licensees that have agreed with this avenue. Ross, Jamie, what's your 2 cents on give Bridget either some criticism or a super girl? You know?
So I before you went on for so long, I was going to interject. I'm in full agreement, but I'm all joking. I think one of the things that came out of this is we were able to educate the state legislators about, or at least the committees, about our business and how we're run. And what I really liked about it is that we, as I said before, it's business as usual, but it's business as usual whether you are a large home inspection company, a single operator, a company that has independent contractors or employees. No matter how you operate your business, I don't think you're going to see a lot of changes. And it was really helpful, and this is the girl to Bridget, to have her make the introductions and be in these discussions to say, hey, wait a minute, you guys, what you're talking about as a state, what you're talking about affects these guys very differently from what their reality is. So that has been very helpful.
I will second that, because even though we knew predominantly what we wanted, this would not have happened without Bridget's expertise. That's without question. We would have been fumbling through this thing for months, trying to figure it out, and Bridget just took the hot knife through butter and made it work. And that's the greatest compliment we can give a professional.
And not to mention all of her connections in the Senate and the House of Representatives, even with the staff at the IDFPR, that made us be heard. So, and yeah, Bridget, you're gonna be stuck with us for a long period of time. I'm sorry. So, if anybody has any questions,
great. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. If anyone has any questions, type them in now. Otherwise, we just wanted to introduce you to Bridget, tell you some of the big changes that are coming. And I think that's about it. So we're going to close this up if nobody's asking any questions, and that's about it. Unless you guys got something else to say. All right. Well, with that, thank you and goodbye.